In this video, we're going to take a look at the membership form application. Uh, this is a membership form that requires the user to fill out. We have a couple different field sets here, registration information, member information, and then we have some submit and reset buttons. So let's take a look at these controls and the HTML that generates this form. So here's the beginning of our form. We have an H1 above it that says membership form that we can see right here. And then we have our first field set, starts here and ends here. That's the registration information. So we have the legend for that says registration information, followed by a label for our email address. Input type is an email input type. And then we have that span, which is set to the star, which is where our validation messages are going to go eventually. We've seen that many times. We have a password input. So when somebody types in that password box, it will show up as asterisks. So it'll be a little bit more secure. Nobody can look over your shoulder and see your password. And then we also have the placeholder for your password, or excuse me, the verify password box, which is pretty much the same, just has a different ID. But we do notice on the initial password box, it has a placeholder. It says at least 6 characters. That's very handy. I hate filling out forms. And here's my new password. And then afterwards, they tell me, oh, it has to have a number, and it has to have a capital letter, and it has to have this or that. I try to always use complex passwords, but it's really inconvenient if it's a place where it's just not that important. If somebody gets my password, I want to use a simpler password. But if they don't tell me that it has to be 6 characters, maybe I'm using a 5-character password. Or if they want it to be 12 characters, they don't tell me. Or they don't tell me that it needs to have a special character. I might use capital, lowercase, and some numbers, and no special characters. So it's nice to notify the user ahead of time. Okay, there's the end of that rant. All right, next we have our membership information box, and we have corporate and individual. When I click corporate, you can see the company name get started, and it puts a little required field over it. We have the individual membership type that disables the company name, and notice it's no longer required field for the company name. So here we have the radio buttons that do that. Their name is type, so they are in a group together called type. And they each have, one of them has a value of individual and one of them has a value of corporate, and that'll come in later in our JavaScript. We'll have to look at those values. Then the company name, and I have to scroll over here so you can see it, but it's initially set to disabled. And that gets changed by the JavaScript that controls these 2 buttons we'll look at here in a little bit. We have our first name field, nothing really special about that. Our last name field, nothing special about that. Our phone number, and we have a placeholder for that, 999-999, and we can see that appearing there. All of these have the span element after them, marking them as required. And it's also where our validation will go, is into those span elements that are right next to the input. And finally, our last field set is our field set where our buttons are at to submit our membership. These field sets are very nice because they tell the user what things they're going to be filling out or what the section is used for. So we have a standard submit button and a standard reset button. Nothing really special about that. And we do have a label with a non-breaking space. You can't really see that here, but that's what keeps these buttons lined up over here so they don't appear over here on the left. It makes the form look better. We're loading our jQuery, and we're also loading member.js, which is where as I always say, it's where the magic happens for the membership form. So let's go take a look at our JavaScript for this form. So member.js, I'll close this down so we can try to keep things open. Slide this over a little bit. And let's see what happens on this form when it loads. So here's our document ready jQuery function for document ready. This is after the DOM content is loaded. This is jQuery's version of that. We're going to do these things first. We start out by setting focus to the email element, which is the very top of our form over here. All right, and then we're going to set up some event handlers. And this event handler is going to run anytime any of the radio buttons are changed. So we have a selector here that gets the radio buttons and sets their change. If one of the radio buttons gets changed, what are we going to do? We're going to get the radio buttons. So we're using the dollar selector to get the radio buttons that are checked and get the value of which one was checked. And if you remember, the value was either individual or corporate for each of these radio buttons. So if the radio button is corporate, if its value is corporate, we're going to set disabled to false for the company name, which will, remember, setting disabled to false will enable this field. And we're also going to add in the asterisk right after it so that it's a required field. If somebody checked the button and it wasn't corporate, that means it must have been individual. So we're going to use the else here to disable the company name and get rid of the text after it saying that it was a required field. So that's what happens when somebody changes a radio button. Here's the event handler if somebody hits the submit button. Okay, so on the membership form, .submit, if somebody clicks the submit button, let's assume that everything is valid, and we're going to go through and find out whether it actually is. So the first thing we do is set up this email pattern. They have this set up, which is a bunch of regex, regular expressions. So without getting too much into regular expressions, this field basically says, here's all the valid characters that we could have in a domain name: capital letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and these symbols are all valid characters, followed by an @ sign, followed by a whole bunch more, oops, didn't mean to do that, followed by a whole bunch more numbers or letters that could come after the @ sign. And after that, there should be a dot, followed by up to between 2 to 4 characters of the letters capital letter A through Z or lower letter A through Z, which is our upper domain name. So .com would fit in there, .biz. I don't really like this one because I know there's some top-level domain names that have more than 4 characters in them. So I think I'd modify that and increase it, because there's a lot of domain names out there now that have more than 4 characters. But this is just a pattern, and this pattern is going to be used later. So this is a regular expression pattern that we're going to use to pattern match later. Again, if you don't have regular expressions mastered, it's okay. If you want to do some checks for email patterns, right here's a reference. You can just steal this and use it in your application, or you can go out and Google. And there's lots of different regular expression patterns that you might be able to make use of that people have already shared on the internet. All right, so what are we doing? We're getting the email address. We're pulling that out of the email box, and then we're trimming it. So we're taking off the beginning spaces and the ending spaces. So dollar function, getting the value, then trimming it by chaining there. Okay, and we're checking to see if it's blank. And if it's blank, we're going to set next to that email box, we're going to get the next element, which is that little span where the asterisk is, and we're going to set its text field to say this field is required. Next, we're going to check this email pattern we talked about. So we're going to take the email address, and we're going to take this pattern.test, and we're going to send it the email address. And that's going to compare our email address to the email pattern that we had established up here. And if it doesn't match, that's what the not is for. If our email address does not match the pattern that we had set up in this regular expression up here, then we're going to go to that next span and set its message to say, hey, this has to be a valid email address. So not only is it required, but it also has to be a valid email address that matches this pattern that we set up. Otherwise, if those two tests are okay, we're going to get rid of our asterisk because they filled in a valid, so we can set the little, get rid of the little asterisk because they put in a required value and it is valid. And then we're going to take the email address that we pulled out, and remember we cleaned it up, we trimmed it. So we're going to set its value back. So if they typed an email with a space in it at the beginning or the ending, this is setting it back without the spaces in it. All right. Next thing we're going to do is validate the password entry. So we're going to get the password value that they typed in, and we are going to get its value, and then we're going to trim it. So no spaces allowed in your password, especially not at the beginning or ending. And then we're going to check the password's length to see if it's less than 6. If it's less than 6, we're going to set that span element to say it must be 6 or more characters. And always, as always, anytime we find something that's wrong, we set is valid to false. If it was long enough, we're going to go ahead and get rid of the asterisk. And then we're going to set the password back to the password they typed without the beginning and ending spaces. So that's every spot along the way on our forms, we're trimming up the spaces at the beginning and ending. That always happens on, I mean, you should do that here on the browser side of things, but most PHP scripts and server-side scripts also do the same thing. We try to clean up the user's entries before we process them. All right, then we have validate the verify entry. And that's the verify. We're checking this box now to make sure the password there matches the first password. And so we're doing some very similar things. We're getting the value out. We're trimming it. We're going to make sure they type something in it. Okay. And then we're going to make sure it matches the original password. If it does, neither one of these things trigger it. We're going to run the else, and we're going to get rid of this asterisk. And we're going to reset the password with whatever they typed, putting it back in without the beginning and ending spaces. Then we're going to validate the company name entry. Okay, and we're only going to validate that. So we have a little if statement here that's going to detect if the attribute is disabled. If the attribute is disabled, we're not going to run any of this. Okay, but if it's not disabled, so if it's not disabled, we're going to check the entry on this. And then same thing on this. We're going to get the company name out, get its value, and we're going to trim it. And then we're going to make sure it's not empty using the same techniques we used above. If it's good to go, we'll get rid of the asterisk, and then of course we'll set the company name back without the beginning and ending spaces that we trimmed off up here. Validating the first name entry, I don't think there's anything. Is following the same pattern that we've used for these other boxes. First name and last name both kind of do the same thing. Trim it up, make sure it's not empty, reset the contents without the beginning and ending spaces. Down here on phone number, we're doing the same thing we did before. We set up a pattern, a regular expression pattern that we saw in a previous video. We talked about 3 digits, dash 3 digits, dash 4 digits. That's our validation password or pattern. We're going to get the phone number out of there, trimming off any beginning or trailing spaces. We're going to make sure that they've typed something in there. And then we're going to run this phone pattern. We're going to take that phone pattern, pass it the phone number, and make sure it matches. If it doesn't match, we're going to put in our span the message telling them to use that format. And then it follows the same way everything else did. Get rid of the asterisk, reset the phone number without spaces. If we make it through all this and is valid, never gets set to false, the form will get submitted automatically, because the submit button that triggered this validation that we've been running through right here, the submit button automatically will submit the form. If something happened and is valid as false, so one of those things that they didn't match, and they still haven't, and they have an error message up here, we're going to run event prevent default, which basically says, hey, something happened. We don't want the default event to happen. We don't want this to get submitted to the server. We're going to give the option for the users to fix their problems. When they hit submit again, it will rerun this script. And if it makes it all through this time, it will automatically get submitted. So, as you can see, using jQuery to validate things is shorter and easier to read than a lot of the ways we've seen in previous chapters. So jQuery for form validation, input validation, user validation, whatever you want to call it. jQuery is very nice and easy to use for that. We can do some very complicated things like email pattern matching with it that are really nice. And you'll get a chance to implement that in this week's assignment.